Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating sermon that takes a story from the Gospel of Matthew you might think you know and connects it to something way bigger. A story about a high mountain and a house of prayer that stretches all the way back to the beginning of the Bible.
So let's just dive right in. It all starts with this question, right? It's kind of the launch pad for this whole thing. We see three really puzzling events in Matthew chapter 21, and honestly, on the surface, they don't seem to fit together at all, but they are absolutely the key to the whole message.
Think about it. First, you get this peaceful, celebrated entry into Jerusalem. Then, bam, an act of what looks like pure rage. And finally, this really strange moment where he uses his power to curse a fig tree. So the sermon we're looking at starts by asking, what on earth connects these three things? They all happen so close together.
Well, the key, the first real clue to figuring this all out, is hidden in what Jesus himself said during that most dramatic moment, when he was clearing out the temple. You see, this wasn't just him losing his temper. His words were a direct quote, pointing us back to a much older story.
When he says, "It is written," that's a huge deal. He's anchoring his actions in the authority of Scripture. This isn't just about his feelings at the moment. He's making a powerful declaration that the temple had lost its way, and he was there to reclaim its true original purpose, to be a house of prayer.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Where does that quote come from? It's from the prophet Isaiah. And get this, Isaiah wrote this about 700 years before Jesus. And notice the direct link he makes. The house of prayer is on God's holy mountain. So this idea, the holy mountain, this is the thread that's going to pull everything together for us. It's a special place where heaven and earth meet. But to really get why Jesus was so passionate about this, we have to ask ourselves, where did this whole idea even come from in the first place?
So the sermon basically puts on a detective hat and takes us on this journey to find the very first time this pattern appears. And to do that, we have to go back way further than the temple, and even way further back than the prophet Isaiah.
To find the answer, we have to rewind, way back. We go past Jesus, past Isaiah, we even go past Moses receiving the law on Mount Sinai. We have to go all the way to the beginning of humanity's new start after a world-ending flood.
And boom, there it is. The sermon points us right back to Genesis, revealing that the very first act of worship on a mountain after the great flood, that is the true prototype. This is the origin story of the holy mountain.
All right, so let's dig into the story from Genesis chapter 8, because it really does build the foundation for everything that comes later, from Mount Sinai all the way to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Can you just picture that for a second? After nearly a year trapped inside that ark, floating on a world that was completely underwater, the very first thing Noah does when he steps onto dry land, on what was basically the highest point in the known world, is build an altar and worship. This one act sets up a really powerful pattern. And check out God's response to this worship. It's not a list of rules, it's not a set of demands. It's a promise, a covenant of blessing for the whole world. This moment of worship on the mountain is a total reset, a new chapter for humanity, and it starts with grace. So what you're seeing here is this incredible through line that spans thousands of years. It starts with the spontaneous altar on Ararat, which gets codified with the law on Sinai, which then becomes a permanent building in Jerusalem. So you see, Jesus wasn't trying to destroy the temple, he was trying to restore it to its original, foundational purpose.
Okay, but this isn't just some ancient history lesson. The sermon makes it super clear that the New Testament writers saw this whole story of Noah as having huge meaning for us, right now. And they used a really specific way of looking at it.
And that way of looking at it is called a type. A type is basically a real person or a real event in the Old Testament that acts like a sneak peek, a pattern that points forward to something even bigger. And the Apostle Peter comes right out and says that Noah's whole experience was exactly that, a type. And this is a fantastic way to see how it connects. Just like the ark was this vessel of refuge that saved 8 people through the waters of judgment, Peter says the church community is our refuge from a final judgment. And that idea of being saved through water points directly to baptism. But Peter is super careful here. He says, look, this isn't about the physical waters scrubbing dirt off your body. No, it's a symbol of something much deeper, a pledge you make to God, a pledge that's only possible because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That ancient pattern from Noah's day finds its ultimate meaning in Jesus. All right, so let's bring it all together. What the sermon does so brilliantly is connect all these dots.
Those confusing events in Matthew 21 suddenly make sense when you see them as part of this one continuous story of salvation, a story that stretches all the way from Genesis to the Gospels, showing this consistent pattern of refuge, judgment, and brand new life.
And so that just leaves us with this big question to chew on. When you understand this powerful biblical pattern, it gives a whole new depth to what Jesus was doing, and to the meaning of faith itself. It kind of makes you ask, where are we taking refuge? And on what high mountain is our own worship really founded?